Hi everybody, I'm Andy Murray for What Culture Wrestling, and in 2020 the MVP of WWE is MVP. Let's break it down. This wasn't supposed to happen. At 46 years old and with almost a decade removed from his last full-time run with the promotion, the last thing MVP saw happening in 2020 was another full-time run in WWE. In fact, all he really planned on doing was entering the Royal Rumble so his 5-year-old son could see him wrestle, working for the rest of the year, and then hanging them up. Speaking to TalkSport's Alex McCarthy earlier this year, MVP revealed that the Royal Rumble appearance was supposed to be a one-off. He had heard that the Royal Rumble was going down in his local area, the Houston area, so he phoned them up, he sorted that out, he made his appearance, and that was supposed to be it. One and done, work the rest of the year somewhere else, and then retire. As we know, things went so well there, and he spoke about this in the interview as well, that he was invited back the following night to wrestle Rey Mysterio on Raw. And again, this was down to his son. Here's a direct quote from that interview with Alex McCarthy, where he says, "The Rumble went so well that they asked me to come back the following night in San Antonio. I was given the opportunity to wrestle Mysterio, and again, that was for my son. Rey is his favourite wrestler." Now, WWE fans could have been forgiven for thinking that this was the end of MVP once and for all. In fact, the man himself even went on Instagram and said goodbye. He said, "This was my final match in WWE. I'm off, I'm done, it's over." But it wasn't over, was it? Because a VIP lounge segment here transformed into an enhancement match there. And before we knew it, in February, Paul Heyman, the Raw executive director at the time, was on the blower and saying, "Hey, MVP mate, do you fancy a producer's job? Okay, deal." So the contract was signed, MVP was back as a producer. But the on-air appearances just kept on coming, and by June, PW Insider were reporting that MVP had been moved from his production role back to a full-time on-screen performer. Soon after that, the seeds for the Hurt Business were sown, and now MVP might be the best manager in all of wrestling. But remember, this wasn't a straightforward process. MVP's first managerial clients as a wrestler cum manager were Brendan Vink and Shane Thorne. That tag team really only lasted a couple of weeks on the WWE main roster before they were shoved off onto a shelf somewhere in Stamford. But while this was going on, while those guys were disappearing, Bobby Lashley, MVP's other client, was rising. For Lashley, I think it's impossible to argue that swapping managers from his kayfabe wife Lana to MVP didn't produce an immediate upturn in fortune. I mean, under Lana, he was kind of wallowing in the muck of that, let's be polite about it, crap romance storyline with Liv Morgan and Rusev as well. He was doing nothing. He was wallowing, he was spinning his wheels. But MVP comes along, he separates this troublesome kayfabe couple, and suddenly Lashley is wrestling for the WWE Championship and feuding with Drew McIntyre. Now, he didn't win that match obviously because Drew is still the WWE Champion today, but it just goes to show it was the biggest spotlight by far that he'd enjoyed since coming back to the company in 2018, and so far removed from guff like Sami Zayn and the fake sisters that it wasn't even funny. Bobby Lashley doesn't even feel like the same performer anymore. And none of this is meant to be a slight on Lana, by the way. She has been an amazing manager herself at various points throughout her run. It's just that in his current form, man, MVP is excellent at every single aspect of the job, and he knows his way around a microphone better than I'd say about 95% of his peers. There isn't a single talker in WWE who feels more real, more authentic than MVP. It helps that time has kind of gruffened his voice up a little bit and made him just sound a whole lot cooler, but he's always had the cadence down. His words are impactful, and if he's being scripted, he certainly doesn't sound like it. Actually, you know, if he isn't being scripted, it might be an even bigger vote of confidence because WWE trusts very few people to actually come up with their own stuff in this hyper-controlled era. If they aren't doing that with MVP, well, it shows they know that this guy is money and should be left to his own devices. And as far as salesmen go, MVP is one of WWE's finest. And it goes beyond his managerial clients as well. Let's talk about his rivals. Let's talk about Apollo Crews. Where was that guy 6 months ago? What was he doing? 6, 7, 8 months ago, go back just before the Andrade feud. The answer is he was doing absolutely nothing. He too was gathering dust on his shelf in Stamford somewhere. His entire main roster run was basically a little feud here, a little title shot there, a brief run at The Miz, Titus Worldwide, and not a whole lot else. Now, after tangling with MVP, Apollo Crews is a player. I'm not saying that the guy's going to be headlining pay-per-views for the WWE Championship anytime soon, but his current mid-card role is a long way from where he was before these guys tangled. And, you know, perhaps Apollo could have gotten to this level on his own had WWE afforded him a fair amount of chances over the past few years, which they haven't done, by the way. But there's no denying that rubbing shoulders with and bantering off and having these matches and engaging in this program with MVP has helped him immensely. Oh, and by the way, when Apollo versus MVP was the in-ring feud before it morphed into Apollo versus Bobby Lashley, Apollo just won every match. He went 2-0 against MVP in US title matches, and that proves that MVP is one of the most selfless enhancers in the game. His major success since returning has come from lifting others up. And we can't talk about doing that without talking about the Hurt Business. Now, I've already spoken a bit about Lashley here, but let's expand on that a little bit, because this is the version of Lashley that we should have had all along. This is the version of the Dominator that rose to prominence in Impact Wrestling, finally becoming the all-out powerhouse, imposing brute, and great wrestler that Vince McMahon wanted him to be all those years ago. He shouldn't have been fanning around with Sami Zayn and his sisters. He shouldn't have been a home wrecker. He should have been a wrecker of men. He's back to that, and he's great at it under MVP's managerialship. Is that a word? You know what I mean anyway. And how about the other guys in the Hurt Business as well? Shelton Benjamin, long considered one of the most underrated wrestlers maybe of all time. What was he doing before all this? He was fanning around on Main Event and doing the odd 24/7 title bits here and there. He's still doing the 24/7 stuff, but it's hard to deny that, you know, he has a lot more purpose aligned with MVP, who can talk him up, who can present him or help present him as a star. And then you've got Cedric Alexander, a tremendous in-ring wrestler, but you know, aside from really excelling on 205 Live, he hasn't had a whole lot to sink his teeth into. He had the horrendous Gary the Goat Garbutt angle in 2019, which WWE thought somehow was going to elevate him. He then had the feud with AJ Styles over the United States Championship, but he was never winning the belt there, man. He lost every single match they had, pretty much, and that was that. There was no clear elevation. The tag team with Ricochet, the Two Fly Crew, well, that didn't take off the ground either. It kind of crash landed while it was still at the airstrip. So, what did WWE do? They took that tag team that didn't quite work, although I think it probably could have had it had a bit more focus, but they took this idea that didn't get off the ground and they transformed it into something more effective. Cedric split from Ricochet, turned his back on Ricochet and Apollo Crews. He joined the Hurt Business, and now he has motives. He has a character. He has purpose. He has a lot more than just his prodigious in-ring talent. And MVP has a lot to do with that. Now, again, this isn't to discredit the individuals I'm talking about here, because all of these people, from Bobby Lashley to Apollo Crews to Cedric Alexander, they could have gotten over to a greater level earlier had WWE afforded them more opportunities, had WWE put a little bit more trust into them. But that didn't happen. And it just goes to show the effect that a really great manager like MVP, who's still a good wrestler as well, by the way, we should acknowledge that, but it goes to show the impact a very complimentary, excellent, top-level manager can have on his clients' careers. And now, the Hurt Business are, in my opinion, the best stable in the company. I know the Undisputed Era exists, but man, these guys are just awesome at the moment. Now, it's important to acknowledge that the short and long-term future of this group is a little bit complicated. WWE can't seem to decide whether or not they are valiant babyfaces sticking up for Raw against Retribution, or if they are bully heels continuing their war with Apollo Crews and Ricochet. They need to sort that out. They need to hammer that down before we can progress. And I think most of us can probably agree that the heel option is a lot more compelling. And of course, you know, there's always that old catcall in the back of your head, oh, WWE, you're gonna ruin it in the end. And to be fair, that's kind of an earned piece of cynicism. I mean, the Summer of Punk ended with Kevin Nash texting himself. Make no mistake, WWE are very good at screwing things up. But MVP has been rolling for 9 months now. He has been at the very top of his game on every single level. Not only making himself look like $1 million, but more importantly, making everyone he comes into contact with look like $10 million. He is doing a wonderful job. He is the most effective enhancer in the entire company, and WWE would be insane to even think about changing a damn thing. And you know what, man? After returning for a one-off appearance in the Royal Rumble, the coolest thing about all of this is that now his 5-year-old son gets to see him on TV every single week. That's nice. That's very nice. The WWE Performance Center, for all its state-of-the-art equipment and for what I'm sure are world-class training courses, cannot produce somebody like MVP fresh out of a shiny box. This isn't a guy you can just replicate in your training center. He's 46 years old. He's been in the game for something like 20 years. He is a product of his skills and experiences to date, and he's one of the absolute best in the world at what he does. He truly is one of a kind, and WWE would be wise to let the guy shine. But anyway, that's it. My take on the matter is done. Go ahead and fire off your hot takes down in the comment section below. Look, there are plenty of other candidates for this MVP status in WWE. Roman Reigns has been excellent recently, for example, but if you look at the sheer volume of people that MVP has lifted up around him, taking his spotlight and shining it on everyone else, I think he is the man. But let us know what you think down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Then you can follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE and myself at Andy H. Murray, where you can tell me how wrong I am. Goodbye.